everyone to another day of our International Psychology Congress, Science and Society. Today we have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Diana Hill. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start introducing Dr. Diana. She is a clinical psychologist who studied at the University of California in Santa Barbara, has an specialization in biopsychology, followed by a doctor's degree in clinical psychology at University of Colorado at Boulder, where she collaborated with Stanford University to research mindfulness and acceptance-based approaches to eating disorders. Diana completed her pre-doctor's internship in the eating disorders emphasis area at the University of California at Davis, and her postdoctor's fellowship in the intensive outpatient program at the Luna Center for Eating Disorders, a center of which she was later clinical director, where she helped to develop the ACT-based group program. She's author of the ACT Daily Journal and the Self-Compassion Daily Journal. She's also founder and host of Your Life in Process and co-founder of Psychologist of the Clock podcasts. Is the writer of Psychology Today blog, besides she's mother, homesteader, researcher, teacher, and therapist. We are lucky to have her today with us, Dr. Diana Hill. Thank you again for your time. It's a pleasure to have you today with us. And we are going to start the interview. We are going to base the interview on your Self-Compassion Daily Journal, and we would like to ask you some questions. The first one is, what motivated you to write the Self-Compassion Daily Journal, and which is the main message you want to share?
Well, the Self-Compassion Daily Journal is an integrative approach to self-compassion. It builds on compassion-focused approaches, compassion-focused therapy, with ACT, with acceptance and commitment training. And really the source of the journal came from a conversation and a workshop that I participated in with Dr. Matthew McKay, who is the founder of New Harbinger Publications. I found myself at World Conference, ACBS, sitting next to him. And we were actually in a workshop that was focused on the inner critic. And part of the workshop was to share a shameful memory that shaped you as an individual and that maybe you still carry now. And we did this real play where I shared a shameful memory of mine, and he was practicing as a therapist to me in this workshop. And afterwards, then he shared a shameful memory and I practiced back. At the end of that day, he turned to me and said, "I think you should write a journal on self-compassion." So it came from my own personal experience of how compassion, how self-compassion, and really this flow of compassion can shift us in dramatic ways that then actually can open us up and allow us to move towards our values. This marriage of ACT and compassion-focused approaches feels like a perfect meeting of the two, because in a lot of ways, compassion is a process that is encompassed in all of the 6 psychological flexibility processes. And just being able to have this focus on self-compassion, I have found is really helpful for myself, but also in the clinical work that I do.
Wonderful. Can you tell us what is self-compassion for you?
Well, the definition of compassion is a combination of being able to contact pain or suffering, and then offering care, kindness, support. And when we turn that towards ourselves, we're practicing self-compassion. Kristen Neff has a definition that includes kindness and mindfulness and common humanity. Paul Gilbert has sort of that definition of the contacting pain and alleviating suffering. But in a more kind of general way, self-compassion is different than self-care in that you don't have to go do it, sort of after this. I can do it right now. As you and I are speaking, you can do it right now, where we kind of notice a part of ourselves that may feel uncomfortable or needs some help or is struggling. And the way in which we approach that part of ourselves is not critical or harsh or shoving it away, but rather meeting it, breathing into it, allowing it to be there, and taking care of it. And that is a practice that we can do pretty much anywhere. And that when we do it, it gives us greater capacity to be with our struggles, our mistakes. Folks that are more self-compassionate tend to be able to make a mistake or have something they regret and not be completely crushed by it or stay in it and ruminate on it. They actually see it as an opportunity, like, okay, here's an opportunity where I can learn and I can grow and I can change, because they're being kind to themselves in the process. And folks that are more self-compassionate also may be able to spread more compassion to others, because if you can be with your own pain, then maybe you can sit with somebody else's pain. And I've certainly seen that as a therapist, that the more that I practice self-compassion, the more capacity I have to show up for my clients in meaningful ways.
Oh, nice. That takes us to another question, which are the benefits of having a self-compassion diary for our daily lives or in difficult situations.
Well, the research shows that folks that are more self-compassionate have greater well-being. They tend to be more resilient. They actually perform better. There's even sort of a fun research study where it's called the donut study, where they brought in, or I call it the donut study. I don't think it's actually called that. I call it the donut study, where they brought in participants who were restrictive eaters and maybe were kind of like rigid with themselves around food, right? They brought them into a study, and half of the group, everyone was given a donut to eat in the waiting room. So we know from research experiments, once you've signed the consent form, you are now in the research experiment. But people didn't know this. So they all ate the donut in the waiting room. And half of that group of restrictive eaters, after eating the donut, were given a self-compassion intervention. We're told things like, everybody eats a donut here. Don't be so hard on yourself. It's not a big deal. It's just a donut. And the other half was not given an intervention. And then they put them in a room full of candies, chocolates and mints and all of the yummy candies. And the folks that were restrictive eaters but had self-compassion intervention after eating a donut ended up actually eating less. So it's interesting, right? That we think that self-compassion is actually going to make us lose our edge, or we'll get lazy, or we'll just sit around and eat candy all day because we're, being so compassionate towards ourselves. But actually what the research shows, and there's over 2,000 studies at this point looking at self-compassion and its benefits, the research shows is that you end up making wiser decisions because you're acting in a place of what is not what I should do or what do I feel guilty about, but more like what is best for me. Like, really, what I've had enough sugar today. I just ate a donut. I don't think I need any more. Right. And that type of, it's a little small example of a study, but we see it all over the place in terms of self-compassion will support you in being the best version of you. And that is really aligned with, also what we see in ACT, where we're trying to help people get flexible with their thinking, get flexible with their feeling, get flexible with their behaviors so that they can get moving in directions that matter to them.
How do you manage to help others to accept their body, for example?
Well, that's a big task. Yeah. I mean, I've been working on that personally for myself for decades, right? In terms of in my own recovery from disordered eating, and then in working with people that struggle with all different forms of body stigma and body shame. And I think one of the first places to start is starting to listen to your body, because a lot of times when we don't like our body, or we don't feel comfortable within our body, we shut it off. We disconnect from its signals, right? We don't know if we're hungry or full, or we don't know if we're tired or angry. We don't know if we're anxious or, just exhausted, right? So tuning in and having some simple practices where you start to just listen And those could be mindfulness practices or just checking in throughout your day of like, what am I feeling? What do I need? What's going on inside here in this body? Not up here in my head, but actually here in my body. That's the first practice, that maybe your body has some wisdom, has some things that it wants to tell you, and listening. And then there's sort of like this movement, at least here in the United States, around body positivity. And I actually don't think we have to get to a place of body positivity, but we can get to a place of honoring and listening, and then seeing its function. That your body is doing all sorts of things. Your heart is beating, your body's being breathed without you having to breathe it. Your pancreas is producing insulin, working hard right now, and starting to change that sort of function of the relationship with your body, and seeing your body in that way. And then, with the Self-Compassion Daily Journal, we're also working on things like paying attention to your hunger and fullness, practicing movement in ways that is, compassionate movement. How at least here in the United States, there's like, exercise culture, which is very kind of punitive in some ways, right? Rather than actually relating to our movement as something that our body wants. I mean, we evolved to move, we evolved to walk, we evolved to climb things, we evolved to carry things, whether it's babies or groceries, right? And just sort of changing that relationship with how we see movement and food as well. So it's a long process, and we're kind of swimming upstream when it comes to culture and messaging that we get around our bodies through the media, through capitalism, which can be very much about trying to sell us stuff, and that the worse we feel about our bodies, the more likely we're going to buy it. So there's definitely a lot of systemic and contextual factors that are impacting us.
Yeah, it's a deal. Which are the main challenges when trying to practice self-compassion, and how do you manage them?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is one of the things that I talk about first in the journal, which is our fears of self-compassion. Marcela Matos, who is in Portugal, has done a lot of research in this area in terms of fears of compassion. And in fact, she found during COVID, she did a study with over 21 countries, over 4,000 participants, and found that, 21 countries, she's gathering all these people together to do this research study, and found that people who fear compassion, so we're afraid that if we're kind to ourselves, then we're going to become lazy, or we're going to become needy, or that it's weak, or we're afraid that if we're compassionate to another person, we care, it's just going to be too overwhelming, or they're going to need us too much, right? So these fears of compassion, what she found is that folks that have higher fears of compassion actually fared worse during COVID. They had, sort of more negative mental health consequences. So that's one of the first places that I'll start with clients is asking, what are you afraid of if you were kinder to yourself? What are you afraid would happen? And you hear all sorts of things. Like, at least for me early on, it was like thinking that being harsh or critical with myself was how I got myself to this position, to like, it's how I got my degree, right? Because I just was hard on myself. And those are correlational, but not causational, in that it wasn't my being hard on myself that got me my degree. And actually, the more that I practice self-compassion, the more effective and productive I am, because I'm not burning out, and because I'm more authentic, and because I'm choosing things that align with my values and that are energizing to me rather than depleting to me. So with self-compassion, it actually can increase your performance, but a lot of people have fears around it, and that requires some experimentation. I'll encourage clients sometimes to just do a little self-experiment. Try it out. If you were kinder to yourself, if you were listening to your needs and responding to those needs, if you were not so critical and harsh, and you did that while you were working on that paper that you're writing, try it out 10 minutes, an hour. What happens? Are you a little freer to write? Do you create something that's a little bit more creative? Are you less blocked? Do you feel better while writing? Now we have a little pre-post non-scientific experiment on yourself to show that self-compassion actually will help you do the things that you want to do that are important to you.
We have another question. Can you share some examples or exercises that the audience can find in the Self-Compassion Daily Journal?
Yeah, I have a lot of different exercises. So the way that the journal is set up is that it's 8 weeks, I think, 8 weeks, and each week has 7 days, and every week has a theme, right? So we have a theme around opening up to feelings, or we have a theme around compassion for the body, or a theme around forgiveness and regret. And that theme then has 7 practices to support it. So one of the self-compassion practices that can be really helpful was one called the jelly roll exercise. And this I learned from one of my teachers in compassion, who is Trudy Goodman, who is partner to Jack Kornfield, who's a very well-known, they're both very well-known practitioners, the Buddhist practitioners. And the jelly roll exercise is you just imagine, and it's called the jelly roll because we have jelly rolls here, which are they're like pastries that are full of like really sweet, yummy jelly on the inside. Okay, a jelly roll. So you get to sit in the middle of the jelly roll, and then you can imagine, and you could do this before bed. It's a lovely before bed exercise. You imagine being surrounded by people, spiritual figures, animals, people of past, people who are present, who want the best for you, who care deeply about your well-being, who are energizing to you, who are motivating to you, who see you as someone that's easy to love, right? So you surround yourself in your imagery, in your mind, with these people, and you look at each and every one of their faces and you take in their good. That's a practice of self-compassion, because when we are acknowledging that we're not alone, we actually have people or teachers or coaches that really care for us, it boosts us up. It makes us feel stronger. It's encouraging to us. And you could do that little jelly roll exercise before you walk into a difficult conversation or a difficult meeting. And that will help you feel more supported. So that's one that I like to do. But there's lots of different ones in the book that I could share as well.
Hopefully we can have for all the Spanish speaking people the Self-Compassion Daily Journal in Spanish someday. Hopefully it will be a good.
Yeah, we have lots of Spanish speaking people in the United States that would love it to be in Spanish as well. So I can talk to the publisher about that. That would be wonderful.
Yes, it would be amazing. Okay, and we're nearly finishing. Is there any other message you want to share with all these participants of the Psychological International Congress?
Well, I guess the message would be I see compassion as a path to our future, right? That when we can practice compassion for ourselves, and we can give compassion to others, and we can receive compassion from others, we are much stronger as humans and much stronger as a collective. And it activates a whole nother part of our brain and body and system and being that is regenerative. That we have I think we have very much a misconception here in the United States, that in my experience with Peru, that you have much more deeper understanding of how interconnected we are. And I remember traveling to Peru when I was 40 with my mom. My mom grew up in Peru, and and how touched and moved I was by the practice of Gracias Pachamama. That we did it before we ate, and we did it before, so many different things. We say Gracias Pachamama. And now when I teach yoga to kids, we do our sun salutations and we touch the ground and we say Gracias Pachamama, because there's a deeper understanding of this gratitude and this connection and this kindness and compassion, how it is a resource. It's a resource that motivates us to care for our planet, for nature, for the plants, for the mountains, but also for each other as humans. And so compassion is a huge, wonderful force that we can tap into. And it can begin with ourselves. But my hope is that it's more than just about the small self, but it's about much, much larger than that.
In the Self-Compassion Daily Journal, could everyone be invited to read it, or just psychologic people?
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah, the Self-Compassion Daily Journal was written for, I always write for both, and I always speak to both, right? To the general public, but also the practitioners. And actually, in the beginning of my bio, my podcast is now called The Wise Effort Show. I changed it from this Your Life in Process. It's called Wise Effort now, because I want to be able to teach about for the general public and for clinicians how we can use our effort and our energy more wisely. And that is like one seed, many birds is what we say here. One seed can feed many birds. So my hope is that the teachings that I offer are feeding therapists, researchers, giving them ideas, but also feeding all of us as humans that will benefit our well-being. Yes.
What comes after the Self-Compassion Daily Journal? What are you working on for after reading it?
Yeah, too many things. I'm working on 2 books. One book is on movement and psychological barriers to moving our bodies. I use a lot of ACT and a lot of compassion, and that's co-authored with Katie Bowman, who is a biomechanist, because we are very blocked we know the benefits of physical activity and movement, but we've gotten all off track, especially here in the United States, where we've lost contact with natural, nutritious forms of movement, and we get all in our heads about it. So I have a book on that will be out in January of 2025. And then in summer of 2025, I will be out with a book that I'm working on right now that I'm actually finishing up the first draft of, and it's due in 2 weeks, called Wise Effort. And Wise Effort is about taking your energy, putting it into places that matter to you, that feed back to you, but that also have a positive impact on our communities, our families, and our planet. So it's getting people who are, in the United States, we say, spinning their wheels. You feel like you're working hard and you're going nowhere, but taking that energy, that care that you have, and putting in places where it will grow and will feed one seed, many birds. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We are looking forward for those books. We are so excited. We are looking forward also to read the Self-Compassion Daily Journal here. I'm sure all these people here will love to see your work. Thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much.